Hello, I'm your host, Ron Whitlock. Thank you for joining us on the program. The title of the program, Mayor with arguably the biggest fiduciary responsibility of any small town in the entire United States of America. Quite a title, but we think it's accurate. The person holding that post currently, Bob Pinkerton, the incumbent mayor of South Padre Island. Bob, thank you for joining us on the program.
Thank you.
His challenger, Kirk Mills, a former alderman on South Padre Island, also here to talk to you and I about this title. Why that title? Well, owners of billions of dollars of condominiums, mansions, and even mobile homes live on South Padre Island some of the time, but they live someplace else some of the time. And they're finding more and more that these estimated owners, taxpayers, South Padre Island, a barrier island off the Texas coast, come predominantly from Dallas-Fort Worth, McAllen, Denver, Colorado, California, Mexico. About 40% of the island's owners live most of the time in Mexico. Canadians increasingly buying property on South Padre Island. Many voting where they live in these locations. However, increasingly they're moving their voter registration card to Cameron County, Texas, South Padre Island, Texas, because they're concerned about the future of their island, South Padre Island, and their major investments on that barrier island along the Texas Gulf Coast. So, you ever thought of it in that term, Bob? I know you run island services. You represent a good number of these out-of-town, out-of-state, out-of-country owners. You communicate with them in a way that many others on your council do not.
Well, having done it since 1973 when I moved there, I'm fully aware of the interest that absentee owners have on their property and how South Padre operates. And you're correct, there are some that are changing their voting right to South Padre Island. And so it's very important to include them, although as of right now, not that many of them vote on the island, but they need to be taken into consideration.
Now, your challenger, Kirk Mills, Kirk, we're going to give you the first opportunity to really explain why you want to have Bob leave the position of mayor of South Padre Island, and you fill his position as mayor of South Padre Island and take on this huge fiduciary responsibility. You understand what that means because you're an attorney at law, of course. So since M comes before P, we're going to go alphabetical. Other than that, we're going to have very little structure on this conversational program. We're going to let you go first and explain why, to the audience, why you think you'd make a better mayor for South Padre Island than he currently is.
Well, first of all, Ron, I want to thank you for asking us here and being a part of your program this evening. When I chose to run for mayor, I had a group of people asking me, and had been for some time, to run. And when I filed, the word on the street that I had heard was that Bob was not planning to run again. And in fact, I didn't file on the first day. I waited till midway through the filing period to file. And I filed, and then the next week, I got notice that Bob, I think, filed on the last day.
So you're here to apologize and withdraw?
Well, not exactly. Once I'm in to win. But what my point is I'm not running against Bob, and I'm not trying to take anything away from Mr. Pinkerton. And he's been a good mayor, and I'm happy to have him serve on the board with him.
And you all have served before on the Alderman
We've been
Council.
on the board before, but the point is I'm running for South Padre Island. That's why I'm running for South Padre Island.
Okay.
And it's not anything personal against Bob. And I just think at some time there comes a point where you want to hand the baton off to the next generation and pass it on to the next group of people. And I like to think that while sitting on the board, I was instrumental in getting a lot of the younger people involved in the city affairs out there. If you look at the makeup of our committees, we have a lot of people who in the past weren't on committees. And when I served the first term, we started putting the younger people on the committees. And that's the future of the island, the younger generation that, they're the ones that are going out on a limb right now and risking and going into debt to put in restaurants and bars and entertainment things that will benefit everyone on the island. So that's part of it.
So thus far you've been able to vote, and Bob as mayor has not been able to vote unless there's been a tie. So
more or less,
you're going to go to the position of being in the bully pulpit and trying to go out and convince maybe spring breakers to come in larger numbers and the young to get involved where they may not have been thus far.
More or less, that's true. Yes.
Yeah. Bob, your response.
Well, You know, youth isn't particularly everything, although sometimes they say that youth is wasted on the young. However, having said that, I was also once there, and I feel like I still am, and I'm still very good for South Padre Island. I'm in business. I have a condominium rental company. We manage property. I have a son, 34 years old, that works with me that wants to get involved and is in the process of learning. And so being involved with the town, because he certainly gets involved with the company. And so I'm not sure that while youth is needed on committees and on the Board of Aldermen, I think they need to get, I think they need to have the experience before they come on and not shoot from the hip. And they need the experience on committees, making meetings, and so on and so forth. So I think I agree that youth has to come on board, but they need to also be trained and can't come straight on.
So your age, this is not an Obama-Clinton type situation. Your age, Bob?
62.
And yours?
I'm 45.
45. Youth and some experience and gray hair and a little bit more experience. I guess that's the discussion point.
Experience, yes, 16 years. Not only 16 years on the Board of Aldermen in one form or another, but on the Convention Visitors Bureau Board for a good number of years when I wasn't serving as mayor or alderman. So I think that I bring experience to the table.
$53.8 billion spent in the Lone Star State of Texas by tourists, that being somebody from outside the state line of Texas. Could be Mexico, it could be Canada, it could be international, but that number of dollars comes into the state coffers. That's the state of Texas balance of trade. That means a lot to the economy of the entire Lone Star State of Texas. And the number 5 destination, South Padre Island, Texas. So when you talk about being the mayor with the biggest fiduciary responsibility of any small town in Texas, arguably, that's what we're talking about, fellas, because you have a fiduciary responsibility not only to these thousands of condominium owners who spend billions of dollars buying these properties on your small barrier island. 700 people who are currently registered to vote there are determining who's going to be the mayor. So even though a small number of people are going to elect whether you, Mr. Bills, or you, Mr. Pinkerton, are going to be the mayor of that town, of that community, second responsibility is to the state of Texas. $53 billion coming to the state of Texas. If they don't come to the island spring break or some other function, then those dollars are going to be lost. Do you feel that responsibility to the Lone Star State and to those condominium owners and others?
I certainly do. I've met with the Property Owners Who Care, and that's an organization that's formed out of Dallas, and they've got local people. They formed to address these issues of people who don't live here but own a lot of vast property on the island.
Right.
And I've met with them and keep in contact with them. They have my numbers, my cell phone, my home phone. They have my email address. I correspond when they have a question. I address their concerns. And it's not just members of the Property Owners Who Care, it's other people who've contacted me. And in the past, we've talked about rentals in the B District, and I would get calls from people in 600 states that own property on the island, 1 or 2 or 3 beach houses, and they would have them in the rental pool. And so I've always considered, although my responsibility number 1 is to the voters, but I also don't overlook the out-of-state people and the out-of-town people that own property on the island, because as you've already pointed out, most of the property is owned by people who live somewhere else. Your
challenger, Mr. Mills, claimed that he has a good relationship through email and others through these out-of-town owners. Your response, Bob?
Well, obviously, in the property management business and the number of units that we rent, I also have a good relationship with out-of-state or absentee owners, whether they're out of state or in state.
How many?
Or out of the country. In rentals, about 225. In property management, about 600, or a little bit more than that.
Right.
And I too have a good relationship with the Property Owners Who Care, but more importantly, I have a good relationship with the 40% of the owners from Monterey and Mexico. I'm fully bilingual. I communicate on in their language. And I was also instrumental in setting up the sister city arrangement with San Pedro Garza Garcia, which is primarily where most of the owners come from. So I not only communicate with the out-of-state owners, I communicate fluently with those owners that are from Mexico.
Well, one of the main issues that the out-of-towners have is the success or failure of spring break. If spring break fails, does not attract the kind of dollars retail sales wise, then not only the condo rental people, the owners who like to put them in rental pools, pay their taxes out of those renters, they're affected. All the business people on the island, they're affected likewise. And on our recent program, we talked about the fact that the Island Breeze, a local daily newspaper on the island, talked about in 2007 that Texas Week, W-E-A-K with a question mark, was off, according to Dan Quant at that time, about 9%. And the same headline, 2008, Texas Week, claiming at that point in time that spring break Texas Week off 40 to 50%. Those staggering numbers to many who have been watching the island through the years. What's going on, and who would make the best mayor to try and deal with this issue, whether to try and get the spring break people who used to come to return, or to create different segments that are going to need to come in and fill the bill?
Ron, I'm not wedded to the idea of a spring break and it having to be a big bust every year, but I think that it's part of the mix, and until you replace that segment and have it replaced, it's very imprudent to run them off. And I think that today's spring breakers are possibly tomorrow's visitors and travelers that bring the families here, and then the day after that, they're the investors in the island. And I have friends who manage some of the local restaurants and nightclubs there who have in their 40s now that came there for the first time when they were in college as a spring break.
Did you come there first time with on a spring break?
No,
visit?
I always wanted to. We always
How
did.
about you, Bob? Was your
No, I was in Vietnam.
in Vietnam, so your spring break was Vietnam to the island.
Correct.
When I was in college, spring break was a family affair, and I'd like to see it return to that. I went with my family skiing. I still go to those same destinations because I have good memories of what a wonderful time I'd had as a spring break student. And that's the kind of image that I think we can work on the island, make it a family-friendly spring break. But I don't think we should run off spring break altogether. I think that
You think they've been run off?
I think they have been run off, and I think
In what
your
way?
your statistics that you mentioned, and I don't know if you remember the years of 92, 93, 94, spring break began at the end of February and lasted through April. And then over the statistics you're quoting now from the CVB might just be last year, off from last year, but it's dwindled from 92, 93 through now. And
Has the actions of the township council caused that to happen in some way, Bob? Or Kirk?
No, but I disagree with Kirk on that, because spring break historically from 1973 was really a strong 2 weeks and then some shoulder weeks. What has dwindled is the strong 2 weeks. We still have shoulder weeks. We have kids on the island right now, and we had kids at the end of February. We had more kids the second week of March, or the third week of March, that is during Easter week, than we had during Texas week this year. And we had kids the last week as well. So we've got kids. However, the numbers have dwindled, and I think we have a lot of reasons for the numbers dwindling. A lot of competition. Kids can go to Mexico for a lot less expensive cost. They can drink from 18 years of age on.
A lot of complaints on the island from locals and spring breakers about TABC, overzealousness in their
But Ron,
crackdowns
that
and
problem
so
has been there since the mid-'80s. So that's
You don't
nothing.
think it's worse?
it's worse.
I don't think it is.
How's it worse, Mr.
It's
Bell?
worse this year. It was a legitimate concern. I had a friend who has his daughter home from SMU for spring break for Texas Week. She's never been in any kind of trouble. She's a scholar, a good scholar, and a good student.
You said she'd never been stopped before?
She never gets into trouble. She got stopped 3 times in 1 week while she was on the island at spring break on the island. What are the odds that one person would get stopped 3 times in a year or a month, but let alone 1 week? I got stopped.
Was she good looking?
She's a beautiful girl, but that doesn't justify it. And I got stopped during spring looking. And
Well,
I
there
know
is sexual harassment by young, testosterone-laden young officers from around the state coming to South Padre Island. They'd rather stop a good-looking young girl than they would you or Bob or myself.
I think you have a point there, and that's one of the things that I think we need to address is why they were stopping so many people. And I got
There is a
pulled over.
complaint mechanism through TABC for anybody that wants to complain about such a stop.
Oh, sure.
And that needs to be promoted if that is in fact going on.
Sure. And when I got pulled over, they said I was speeding, and I specifically had lived through the last week watching people get stopped at every turn. So I wasn't going to speed. I saw the vehicle in front of me was a patrol officer, and he was going less than the speed limit, so I just changed lanes and went around him, and then he pulled me over. and let me go. I didn't get a warning or written up or anything, checked my insurance and license. I think when he saw it wasn't a car full of kids, that was it. So.
Now, Mr. Mills, there are some residents of the community of South Padre Island concerned about your move at one point in time to try and put the Convention Visitors Authority Board under the city manager and taking it away from the somewhat autonomous board that it currently has. If you're elected mayor, do you intend to go back and try to promote such a change?
Ron, I think it makes sense to do that. And the reason I think that is it operated that way very successfully for many years. And it was only a couple of years back that we switched it over to a CVA. At the makeup of the board at that time, it was there were 5 board members, and it was a 4-to-1 vote to turn it to a CVA and take it out of the auspice of the Board of Aldermen. But what that does is it makes it one step removed from the voters. So if the voters have a concern that aren't getting addressed, they can't just vote to change their board. And I think if you hold the Board of Aldermen responsible and hold us accountable, then if you don't like the decisions we make, it's easy to get rid of us. You just vote us out of office.
Bob,
And at the time, it was a 5-to-1 vote.
They can still vote you out of office because the Board of Aldermen has complete control over everything the CVA board does today. They approve the budget, they approve the marketing, they approve everything the CVA does. And to put it back under the Board of Aldermen would only mean to make it political. And that's the worst thing that we can do. You want the CVA and the Convention Visitors Bureau to be controlled by those people or managed by those people that are in the business. And politicians have no business doing that. When it operated under the Board of Aldermen, the mayor at the time was the one that oversaw the executive director. And that didn't work because Ed Saganowitz, whom he and I get along very well, he and I have talked about it, there was just no way he could ever manage the executive director. It wasn't his job. It wasn't his forte. And so when I came in 2002, after Ed left office, I said, I don't think this is the way we need to do it. While I'm in the business, I have no business trying to manage the executive director. Those that are in the business on a board need to manage it. Everything is still controlled by the Board of Aldermen. People don't like it, they can vote us out.
A Mexican airline was recently approached by the South Padre Island Brownsville Airport Board about trying to put in international flights out of Mexico into the Brownsville South Padre Island Airport. The second visit by the delegation from the airport to Mexico, the expenditure of those travel funds was denied by the city manager of the city of Brownsville. And therefore, that airline that was getting ready to ink the deal claimed that they went to McAllen instead, all because the city manager, who didn't understand how important getting a Mexican airline to fly into the Brownsville South Padre Island Airport, didn't approve the several $1,000s for them to fly down to ink the deal. Talking to people in the marketing business, Mr. Mills, to put something that you're talking about, a marketing approach under a city manager is a very serious and could be adversely consequential act, in my opinion.
It is, but we would still have the board. It just wouldn't be an executive board. It would only be in an advisory capacity. And so ultimately, they would still be running the show. I don't foresee anybody that would be in there micromanaging. The last time it was that way, we made an error in the board, and we got behind a project that wasn't a good project. But the last person I asked was the executive director of the convention center, are you for this project or not? And he said, yes, I'm 100% behind it, and it'll dovetail nicely with our marketing group with the Adkins agency.
I'd like to add on that was purely a political ploy.
The comprehensive development plan of South Padre Island could cause individuals such as the Jaws store with a nice Jaws shark coming out of it, McDonald's if they want to have a statue of Ronald McDonald, or the 3 flags over Padre Gorilla to not be able to be built under the comprehensive development plan. Should the city be getting involved in trying to dictate the style of commercial entities and the paint colors of the businesses that are being built in your South Padre Island, like Fredericksburg, where if you want to get something built, you got to go octoon to the city council and get it done?
Well, there are many communities, many cities. You can look at them left and right who control that kind of thing, and it really makes the community look good. I'm not saying that we need to stop everything, but I think there needs to be some control on what is done within the business community.
Your response?
We had a man come from the TIPS agency, and I think that was Theories into Practice Strategies, and he was a marketing expert, and Mr. Stellman was his name, and he said one of the things that the island needs to do is embrace our eclectic nature and our diversity and promote that.
Do you disagree with
Well,
Mayor Pinkerton?
we all want Bob and I want the island to
bit.
look the best, but he says embrace that eclectic nature. And if you paint everything beige and make everything look the same, then you're not embracing that eclectic nature. Some towns have promoted this, and it's been very successful.
But I don't think that's that we're talking about painting everything beige or and I know that's an exaggeration.
Yeah. One
But-
quick last question. Should South Padre Island embrace and be a party to the regional convention center concept for Cameron County and one of those stakeholders? Yes or no?
It needs to be studied.
I say no. That competes directly with our local business on the island, and my job is to look out for the island first.
Thank you both for coming and being with us on the program. If you want to register to vote on South Padre Island, you can go to www.co.cameron.tx.us, click on Administrations, Elections, Voter Registration, and then go vote, and make sure you take your voter's ID and or your driver's license, Social Security card when you do go and vote. Thank you for joining us on the program. Till next time, adios.